We rely on our brain to make all the rational decisions all day long, every day. But what if our thinking is faulty? From time to time, our brain falls into traps, so-called thinking traps, patterns and connections that our brain created over time, which are not helpful, such as thinking that a situation A leads to situation B all the time. Although we don't know, maybe situation A might lead to situation B at one point. But let's figure out what this has to do with migraine. Over time, living with migraine, we establish a certain way of thinking about our disease and responding to situations with migraine. And there are thinking traps that help us to explain how these thoughts develop. And by understanding those thinking traps, by knowing them, we can watch out for them and maybe respond to certain situations, emotions, thoughts we have related to migraine in a different way. So I want to talk about 3 of those thinking traps today. Number 1, overgeneralization. Number 2, should statements. And number 3, mind reading. Number 1 thinking trap, overgeneralization. What our brain does there is take one event and make a pattern out of it. Let's look at an example. For example, last week I went to a team event. And team events, everybody is excited about them usually. There's good food, drinks, joyful conversations. But I got a migraine attack. So, based on this single event, I assume that every team event would trigger a migraine attack. What's the conclusion? Well, I'll better not go. But the best way to overcome overgeneralization is to look at events in isolation. Don't categorize them immediately. Don't blame your migraine attack on the situation of, in our example, the team event immediately. Look at it and look at the situation in question, the team event in this case. And also look at situations where you have had a wonderful time, where the team event was awesome and you really enjoyed it. So try not to create patterns out of one event. And this can happen in your workplace, this can happen with your family, with any situation basically. Try to rationally observe it and see it as a single event. The second thinking trap we're looking at today are should statements. Those are statements and sentences that start with I must or I should, and we repeat them to ourselves all the time. For example, I believe I should go to the gym 5 times a week, as my friend Susan does. This sets a certain expectation, and as I'm trying to meet this expectation, I fail, because I live with migraine while Susan doesn't, and it's really hard for me to go to the gym 5 times a week. So I don't meet my expectations, and I feel guilty because I didn't. But remember that those statements, I should, I must, I have to, those really set expectations for you, but also expectations you have from others that are unrealistic. What's more helpful is if you look at goals in a way like I want to. I want to do gentle movement 3 times a week. Make sure that those expectations and plans you have, goals you set, are based on your own experience and your own context. And always look at it in a way that nobody has to do all the things that Susan does or that Mike does. We all have our own life and we set our own goals and what we want to do. The third thinking trap is mind reading. It's when we believe to know what others think. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this doesn't work. We are not fortune tellers that can read other people's minds. But with migraine it often happens. And we think that other people might think we are boring because we do not join something. Or we are mad at them because we cancel on them. Or we're just pretending to have a headache. And we know often that's probably not true. We cannot look into their minds and know what they think. While we project, it makes it harder for us because we react based on what we think others think. So what is more helpful? First of all, honest communication. Telling people how you are feeling and directly asking them what they are feeling and what their thoughts are. Because otherwise there usually always is a misunderstanding. And even if someone actually feels a certain way that you predicted, then at least you know for certain after you ask them. And secondly, Also ask yourself what kind of information is available for them to evaluate the situation and to come to conclusions. And if you figure out, well, it's not enough, give them more information. Tell them what you're feeling and what's going on. Those are only 3 of many thinking errors, traps our brain falls into, so we come to quite unhelpful conclusions. But we'll cover more in the next videos, so you can teach your brain to be your migraine supporter and not its enemy.